Oh. Mm-hmm. Mama.
Hello, hello. On, it's on. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Jennifer McCabe. I'm Director and Chief Curator here at SMOCA. And before we get started, I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We are on the unceded sacred land of the O'odham Peepash people and their Hohokam, Peepaw, Naikor ancestors. We acknowledge and celebrate the Salt River Pima and Maricopa communities, their elders both past and present, and generations to come. They are the original stewards of this land, and we are humbled to reside here. We honor the many diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land that has sustained their people for centuries. They are an important part of our history, our present, and our future. So we're here tonight to celebrate the closing of the exhibition Maker, which was curated by Natasha Boas. So I'm super grateful that they both made the journey here tonight. Natasha is also the guest curator of the concurrent exhibition Swap Meet with Brad Callhammer, and recently did the exhibition here with Deneb Sadira called Voiceover, if you were able to see that. Thanks, Mary.
Oh, thank you.
I really think of Natasha as our curator at large for SMOCA. And I was lucky enough to visit Teresa's exhibition in San Francisco with her last year. And then we were able to follow that up with a studio visit with Teresa in Los Angeles that really solidified the idea of doing this exhibition with her. You'll notice on everyone's chair, we left a small publication for you to take with you. Teresa is a Mandan Hidatsa artist who, like I said, is based in Los Angeles. It's been such a pleasure to host your exhibition here, especially at this important moment in your career as you just received the Joan Mitchell Foundation Fellowship. So congratulations for that. Yes. So I just want to thank everyone for being here for this artist talk, and thank Teresa and Natasha, and invite you up to your stools for a conversation.
Yay. Thank you, Jennifer. I don't know if I'm going to deal with this little bottle. So. Yeah. Okay. Is this working? It's working. Yeah, everybody can hear me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for going with me on this journey with Teresa's work. And I wanted to mention that Teresa also is a graduate of the California College of Arts in San Francisco, and she's beloved and has shown at various events. That's how I've friends in San Francisco, or we hope on live streaming tonight. So hi to everybody. We started with a land acknowledgement, and I thought that's sort of the best way to segue into this conversation. When I think about Teresa's work, Teresa doesn't call these works paintings. I tend to refer to them as paintings, and they really are landscapes. I think you might both agree with that. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your personal relationship to the land and how you see these works. I think these were all done during Ross residency in Wyoming. Most of them. Yeah. Start with
Sure. Before I start there, I wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone here tonight for giving me some of your time. Thank you, Natasha. I wanted to do a few just very quick special introductions for some folks who are in town. David War is here from an old dear friend, really Ferguson, who is having to be here in Hawaii. And I want to introduce my family, my husband, our son. So one way to start is just talking about where I'm from. I'm from North Dakota, and I live from the Fort President Reservation. And my upbringing was throughout the Midwest. And my father was a Forest Service. I'm actually happy that various parts. For me, that was really formative. Take care of land, federal perspective, but also being native in that context, as well as what it means to take care of land from my culture. So that was really powerful for me, and created a really strong relationship with land that I credit for my continuous exploration to how to bring it into my work and how to capture some of those spaces through abstraction and through formal investigations.
So one of the things we were talking about today is if there was perhaps a narrative in these abstractions, going back to are the, I look at them as also as topographies, and through the sort of choices that you've made with your materials, can you talk a little bit about those choices and how you see the abstractions sort of going beyond just formal questions?
Well, something I'm always striving for is, or I guess searching for, is how can there be a sort of sense of aliveness, a visceral quality to an object, to material. My journey and my practice the last 10 years, I've gone through various materials searching for the right thing. And I came across AstroTurf, honestly, by chance. I have a really process-based practice. I was searching for plastic and was at a Home Depot in Beaumont, Texas, and found a really bright blue AstroTurf. So it was really about responding, and I think that's a lot of my practice is responding. And then, as I continue to work with the AstroTurf, and especially thinking about grasses of the Northern Plains, and the sort of the sound of it and the feeling of it, and how it relates to that place. It continues to give me a lot more from where I just started from with it.
And this is the Missouri River.
Yes.
2020, 2021,
I think it's 21.
21. I think you use park flesh, a new material. So I know that you've been using buffalo sinew and willow, but here, I loved your story about the park flesh.
Yeah, the park flesh, I've been carrying around with me in my studio practice for, I want to say maybe 10 years. My father gave it to me as a hey, here's some material, and I grew up around, Buffalo High. I grew up around a lot of traditional materials, and it was just really common for how I was raised, and parfleche being one of them. And so, he gave it to me, and he was like, use this in your art. And I wanted to, but I didn't know how at the time, about 10 years ago. I think I was maybe working with felt, and I was, really trying to understand what I was making and what I was trying to get to with my work. And so it was really in Los Angeles where I started growing a Hidatsa garden in my backyard as kind of a way to think about my continued choices to live in urban environments, away from my community, away from my family. And so as an idea to ground me in this place and also continue a tradition that I was raised with, and that's a part of my culture. So I grow this Hidatsa garden with our heirloom seeds. And I think it was that mix of working outside and also working with this material in general and doing a little bit more of like collage and application, that it started to make sense for me. Like it was the first time I understood how to bring in these cultural materials and have them not just be another shape, but also an identifier and give them a different way of existing in this modern world and existing within my work. So
And it's interesting because there's really a sort of overt meeting of the artificial and the natural in your work. And I had a particular moment today where I walked into the gallery, and the gallery that we're sitting in for this talk is actually the exhibition room turned into with chairs and everything. But when you enter it and you're alone with these pieces, I was overwhelmed by sort of what do we call it? Climate fatigue or climate distress. And I really thought about the AstroTurf as being an obvious kind of alerting us to we can't have grass anymore, we won't have grass anymore. And I'm wondering if these kinds of materials that you've worked with have taken on different resonances over time, and where you are. I mean, we're going to talk about sort of what materials you're investigating now.
They absolutely have. I think it's hard to ignore that, especially living in California, in Los Angeles. And, you know, when I first started working with AstroTurf, that wasn't really in my, I don't think it was really in the dialogue, and it also wasn't in my, it was a new material. I did not grow up with this material. It felt very mysterious to me. But I can't help but think about that as I work on them now. I don't have any answers, or, you know, but it's nice to think about the questions of how we move forward with that. And definitely replacing grass, but is AstroTurf the answer? I'm not so sure about that, but yeah.
Some really interesting questions come up in these works around those types of environmental issues. And I'm really curious, and I've been wanting to ask you this all day, but I was saving it for tonight. You just spent 3 months in the Fogo Island residency in Canada, in Newfoundland. It's an island. It's an incredibly exciting new project. I think I have their statement. I'm super compelled by it. Do I have the statement here? Maybe I don't. But a really a residency that's really committed to political issues and environmental issues, and artists and artist practice, deeply invested in artist practice. And I was wondering if your work has changed based on those 3 months, and different landscape, different land, different, you know, you're really in, I mean, Fogo Island is so different from you across Wyoming or Los Angeles or San Francisco. So what happened this summer?
Well, I think I got back to LA and I put my work up, and you know, when I was making the work, it was hard to see it. I was just kind of in it, exploring the place, making the work, responding, and I put the work up, and I could really feel Fogo in a way I hadn't seen. And I found that the work had a kind of a slowness, just like a really almost like a stark, but and a slow quality to it that felt very much like Fogo Island. And it was a way for me to understand how much environment impacts my work, how I'm responding. And I started making work in LA in the last few weeks, and I just was like pulling out the color again. And it was like, and in Fogo, it's, you know, I think it's like a little bit more muted. And so I feel responsive to these lands. And I do work from memory a lot, you know, even I talk about the Northern Plains all the time because that's home, but also I think I go to these, you know, just vast landscapes that feel so powerful. And I can explore them and I get to explore them, luckily, some of these places anyway. And what I get to take home is that memory.
Mhm.
And then that transforms into the work, of course, a different interpretation, but I get to kind of go back to that place in my memory and remember. So,
And the Joan Mitchell Award, I couldn't help but, I mean, very, very happy for you and proud of you, of course. But also thinking about Joan Mitchell as sort of one of the iconic 9th Street women, mid-century Abex painters, and how your work is often thought about in the context of, Helen Frankenthaler or these color fields. And I write about this in my essay, this sort of Abex language in your work. And so, which brings me to the more difficult question, which is, and I like how you've responded to it in the past, but I'm going to ask it again, which is, how do you feel about that intervention kind of in the Abex space? Or are you doing that, or is something else happening?
I don't mind that, that relationship or being considered a part of that. My connection with that time period and those artists is, this kind of relationship or approach are making through an intuitive way, through a process-based way. That's really important to me. And then also, some of the ideas of bringing the artist in through mark making and, what is that like kind of transfer of energy. And that's my relationship with that.
And another thing that you did say is that the abstract 20th century abstract Abex artists have taken their inspiration from Native American abstraction.
Yes.
So that there's a real echoing, and also really bringing that idea forth to rethink art history in those ways. And I think that's really fierce in your work. And I love that in your work. And again, to loop back to the first thing I said is, you call these wall works or wall hangings. Have you come to any changes in nomenclature?
I haven't. I honestly, I kind of just don't worry about the categorization of them.
Does your gallerist worry?
Just joking. I don't know.
That's just a return.
But yeah, I want to make sure that I'm responding to the materials, to my practice, to kind of what I've built on, rather than worrying too much about whether they're paintings or sculptures or tapestries. I don't care too much about that.
Yeah, I think that I can see that. I mean, I think about kind of the fact that your work poses all those questions about what constitutes a painting. Does painting have material limits? Because you do use paint. You use spray paint, and there is paint in and around on these works. Whose tradition painting belongs to also comes up really strongly for me, and also whose field, space, and ground are you capturing in these works? And so when thinking about abstraction, we often think it's not political, it's not social, and we're not engaged in those kinds of conversations. But clearly with your work, there's an engagement in a lot of other issues that are circulating, or contemporary concerns, values.
I hope so. I mean, I think for a long time, it was so much about the formal qualities, but as I've evolved with it, I understand how much, how personal it is to me, and how all of these different aspects of my life or the current state of the world, it's all coming in, or the land is coming in. And I think that all lives there in abstract work anyway.
It's like this deeply engaged personal and collective experience as an Indigenous person, committed to continuing to narrate these stories that your father re-narrated much of how we think about the national parks, and these how much Gerald Baker, who's a very important Gerard Baker, is a very considered thinker in terms of repositioning the
Yes.
history of the United States.
Well, that was his role, was bringing the native side of the story back to national parks, which was missing in all of the education when you visit a lot of these places. So that was passed on to us. Yeah.
To tell those stories as well. I noticed also recently that Bard College just received $50 million in support for Indigenous studies, and which is absolutely transformational.
It's amazing.
And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you have work in the Forge Project collection, and we're really Forge Project is doing well. But this is like a moment where a lot of these conversations are happening. Do you feel supported by a community? Do you feel like the right conversations are happening? Do you feel that platforms are being created for this in ways before graduate school?
Yes, I think there's a lot more platforms. I think what Forge Project is doing is really exciting. I think there's so many exciting young Native artists out there right now. And I think there's a lot of platforms for these conversations and the impact of Native artists within the context of our history.
I think that Bard's creating a center for Indigenous studies. I don't know, did we want to open it up to some questions from the audience? Yes.
Well, sure. His role, so he had many different roles, but in the later part in my memory and experiences is he was the superintendent of various national parks. From Battlefield, Mount Rushmore. So these contested spaces. So he went up through against a lot to bring in the Native side of the story that had been missing. So so that was that. And I think, my place within that was, number one, it was kind of, it's your childhood and that's just what you know. But as a result, I also got to experience those lands and understand the importance and the history of those places. Not just for my community, but for other Native communities that we were living amongst. And so, I've always kind of wondered and questioned, I guess I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but, I'm dealing with abstraction, I'm not dealing with a straight narrative, but my hope is that, I can sort of encapsulate some of the places and some of the feeling of those places. And that's kind of part of the mission. And was there another part of that question that I missed?
No, I like that because you picked up the idea of the narrative thread and also the sort of more representational thread in a way that sort of you move in and out of, and that really creates sort of the energy of the work, I would say. But I mean, the U-Cross piece is so much. I mean, you can't see it right now, but everybody can turn around and see it. I mean, to me, that operates, I know you talk about the form as being absolutely intuitive, but I could imagine it being a memory of water or a river or land, arbitrary land delineations.
Yeah, that one in particular was really in response to a configuration of rocks at U-Cross that we hiked to in a full moon. And it was, so that one was really in response to that place, those shapes, the colors, which, comes in sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. So, Are there other questions? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yes, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's very much a part of my life. Unfortunately, I grew up listening to my grandmother's stories. My grandmother's unfortunately no longer around, but I have a deep connection with, my family and my community in that place, Fort Berthold. So I believe it's there. It's, it's, I'm not interested in it being like a direct thing, and meaning like I think with sometimes narrative work, you kind of get to play out those stories. You get to like really use certain colors, use symbolism. But for me, I want these pieces to kind of create their own, um, kind of have their own autonomy, their own identity, like with all of these aspects mixed in. So I do, I know these stories, but I don't want them in there directly. Um, I think I think it's combined. Yeah, I think it's combined. I think when I get to bring in the traditional aspects is when I get to bring in the parfleche, when I get to bring in the willow that we made baskets with. So that's the way that I feel like that's my direct, way to bring in tradition, in a very non-traditional way. So the color, oh yeah. Mhm. Right, yep. Mhm. Mhm. Well, I don't, I don't bring in the four sacred colors, purposely. It's just not something I really want to do at this moment. And it's not that I don't want to, it's what I'm interested in is sort of allowing the materials and the new colors to create their own thing, if that makes sense. So the way that I'm bringing that in is through the materials, and not through color. Yeah. So I mean, the hidatsas, we used a lot of orange. Besides the sacred colors, we had like traditional colors that we used: orange, green, blues. Those are kind of signifiers and significant colors. Sometimes they're design based. Sometimes it was. uh, right, right. Yeah. Mhm. Well, I don't personally work in that way. That's the thing is I don't work in symbols. I, uh-huh. Yeah. Mhm.
Mhm. Luscious.
Mhm. Mhm. onto this, like the natural meaning, like what I can find at the store, what I can, how does it signify our current environmental space was your question? Like, yeah. That's a good question. I guess I feel like sometimes the colors allow it to have a little bit of an idea of a blank slate and not be directly related to this is obviously grass or this is obviously that. And so I like that the colors can kind of take you away from that, because I don't want to, again, kind of going back, nothing in abstraction, or at least in my abstraction, is about sort of a directness. It's sort of about the object and about what the object is doing. And so I think that that's what I feel like I can play around with the color, and the alternative colors allow for. Right. Yeah, which I think exactly, and is what this material lends itself to, is kind of an alternate reality, or something maybe we're not quite understanding, where it's coming from, and I like that place. So,
Julio, you had a question. Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Oh, that's so nice.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And time.
Yeah. So usually I'll start with first with the shape, and sometimes it's just I'll put up the AstroTurf, I'll nail it to the wall, and then sort of start with that shape, and then from there I go with color, and so really it becomes this back and forth of what color does this piece need? Does this, do I need to cut out this right side here? And how is that sort of relationship going, playing around with each other? How are the shapes and the lines and the colors and, texture, adding the really thick yarn on the outside, playing a little bit with perspective, and then, this one in particular, of course, has oil pastel. So and then I want to play with like allowing the mark making. So it really, and I sit with it, days, weeks, it just depends until I know what the next move is. And
You made outside.
I made this one
That's- that
outside.
we-
Yep.
Yeah, we saw
yep,
that in
yep.
your studio garden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and I really like uneven edges, and I don't
Oh, really?
feel the need. I don't feel the need for like perfection at the edges. And I guess I know seamstresses and sewers, it would, everything has to be perfect. And I think for me, I feel like just in this work and this making this work is, I think that there's a sense of like humanness that comes through, and like kind of threads that may be showing, or something that's uneven. So, and then I'll work on a few pieces at once, and kind of just go back and forth between them all, adding a mark or a line, or yeah.
With your art,
Mhm.
so
Yeah, sometimes honestly, I'll be doing something else and I'll just see a shape and a color in my mind and I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. You know, I'm going to start with that and I'll start with that. And it won't always be that kind of uh, sort of vision that popped in my mind or idea that popped in my mind, but it gives me a starting place. And I really like relationships that abstract, shape, color. I like how they form together, and so that's something that kind of drives me. And
Go back 2 meters because of like hair.
yeah, I do. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have sweetgrass and I use it. That's something that calms me not for art, but just for life, and gives me a place to return.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Mm.
Mhm.
I like that idea. I mean, I think there's also um, we as humans adapt, right? So, which I guess is sort of maybe part of the baseline theory. I don't know much about that, but so because we're adapting, I mean, look at the urban environments we live in. We're living in concrete. We have a little bit of grass growing through. So, um, I I think that we're always using these new materials that maybe aren't always the best. Um, if there's, one thing I can do, at least the astroturf is going to live on a wall and um, ideally and not, be used on a lawn that's going to then go to the landfill. But I would much more encourage people to go out to the land for sure. This isn't a replacement. This is just a way to bring that into an object. And this is my version of a landscape painting, not to categorize as a painting,
Thank you.
but
Thank you. You did it. You did it. Painting.
but that's what this is. So
I think it's
Yeah.
important also to say that they're not all astroturf.
no, I mean I bring in
This
canvas,
canvas,
yeah,
the outdoor piece that
yeah,
that Julio was pointing at too is actually canvas. So
yes,
kind of
yeah,
I wouldn't say traditional, but there is what I keep seeing, and going back to your very interesting question, is that what Teresa is doing is showing us all of these contradictions, cultural contradictions, aesthetic contradictions, environmental, human, post-human contradictions. Yes. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Materials that aren't meant to be on the wall in the gallery and are really accessible by everyone. And I like to heighten those to be something else. It's just, they're a little bit of an underdog material, and I have just a soft spot for
Yeah.
that. So
I like the underdogs. Any other questions?
yeah. Well, I think one thing that I really love is spending time with them. And what's revealed to me is that, like, sometimes I can see them in a new way. Kind of depends on where I'm at in my life, and but they always give me this way that I can't place them. And that's for me when a piece is finished, is when I can't control. Of course, everyone comes with their own subjective ideas and own attachments to shapes and colors. But what the idea of finished is for me is when I can't look at it and say, like, oh, this is that or that, because then it gets to be its own thing.
I think that maybe we'll wrap it up on this is something that I experienced today with Teresa when she entered the gallery for the first time, seeing her work in a museum, the first museum show. So in an institutional setting, you've had gallery shows and you've shown work in different venues, and you're having a show at Ballroom Martha coming up, a group show. But, and all of a sudden you walked into this room with your works. Curators come in and they make choices. You helped us select where to place them. But how do you feel about this experience of seeing all your works shown in a very sort of particular, just sort of crossing the threshold into the institution?
Well, it's really exciting to be in such a beautiful big space. I work in a really small space in Los Angeles. Half of it is outside, which I really enjoy working out there, but I have like a 200 square foot studio, so it's a lot smaller than the space. So it's exciting that they get a very large wall and space around them. And also nice to see work that started in 2017 and from 2021 and kind of see them all live together. And they didn't all, a good portion happened at UCross, but they also happened at different points in my life in different places. And so getting to see that they have a relationship together is really nice.
And the title, returning back to the title, so the talk is Capturing Space. So like that you brought up issues that are relating to the space and your work and time and space. So I want to thank everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. It's really, really interesting. And thank you, everyone, for your really great questions. Wonderful questions.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you.